So the other day I was watching a YouTube video, imagine that, which featured two very good bass players talking about slap style. And they were discussing both physical and mechanical criteria that could either hinder or benefit a player's slap technique. But as the video progressed, I realized that they were mainly addressing the double thump style of slap bass. And while some of these points might either hinder or benefit double thumping, or as some people call it, double thumbing, they would have no effect or an opposite effect with traditional slap bass. Because even though traditional slap and double thumping are both considered slap bass, they both have very different feeling techniques. So I thought it might be a good idea to make a video about both and to give my opinion about what I think are the benefits and drawbacks of each. First, let's talk about traditional slap. This technique was brought to mainstream attention by Larry Graham when he was the bass player for Sly and the Family Stone during the 60s and early 70s. One of the most famous examples is from Sly and the Family Stone's hit single, Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself. Now, as the 70s moved on, many R&B, funk, and jazz bass players picked up on the technique, such as Stanley Clarke, Nathaniel Phillips, Mark Adams, and Louis Thunder Thumbs Johnson, who, by the way, is my biggest influence on bass. Now, even though many bass players had their own takes and twists of the technique, traditional slap was pretty much the only version of slap bass that there was. It wasn't even called slap bass back then. We just referred to it as slap and pop, bass thumping, or just thumping. That is until the early 90s. That's when a band called Bella Fleck and the Flecktones appeared, whose bass player was slapping in a way that I've never heard before. His name, of course, is Victor Wooten, and that crazy style of slap bass that he brought into the spotlight is double thumping. I remember watching his hand move and hearing twice as many notes than I thought were being played, which is actually part of this technique, and I'll explain it in a little bit. But first, let's talk about the technique and the mechanics of traditional slap bass. With traditional slap, I'm trying to use the side of my thumb, this part right here, and I'm using my thumb to strike the string from a forearm rotation that's driven by the wrist. And I want to emphasize that I use no other muscles in my arm, just these wrist muscles. Utilizing a very focused attack, my thumb very quickly strikes the string and bounces off, aided by a little trampoline response from the target string. It's very similar to how the hammer of an acoustic piano quickly strikes the string to produce a sound. And by virtue of economics, the inbound slap puts my first and second fingers into a position to curl under and snap these strings for the pop. Now, most of these mechanics can be applied to double thumping with very slight changes. But these slight changes produce butterfly effect differences between the two techniques. The biggest one is with the thumb, because instead of using the side of it, you're now utilizing the pad underneath, as well as a good section of this nail on top. And because of this, the angle of momentum has changed. Even though the wrist muscles are still utilized as the motor, instead of traditional slap style's inward fulcrum, like a piano hammer hitting its string, the drive of double thumping is now downward and then back up, similar to a guitar pick. The butterfly effect occurs in the muscles of the wrist. This very slight change has a drastic impact of how the mechanics of the technique are performed. For me, it's almost a completely different feel. As a matter of fact, when I incorporate finger popping, double thumping feels more like finger picking than traditional slap bass. When double thumping the heavier strings, you can strike through your target string and use the string below it for a little trampoline action to come back up and pluck the note with the top of your thumb. Victor Wooten referred to all of this as economy of motion, which is a nice way of saying you're getting a lot of notes with the least amount of effort. Remember, with traditional slap, the trampoline response comes from the target string, not the string below it like double thumping. And this difference in trampoline response location contributes greatly to how different these two techniques feel. So which one is better? Well, that really depends on you, the player. Every person is physically different than another person. We all have different physical attributes, such as different sized hands, and we also have physical mechanics that might seem easy for us but difficult for another person. But in my personal slap bass journey, this is what I find. So if you agree or disagree, please leave a comment below. I personally think that double thumping has every advantage over traditional slap except in two areas. The first is tone. I personally think that traditional slap sounds better. I think the thumb slap has a larger and more robust bloom or blossom of tone. And let me explain why I think this is. Traditional slap bass is just a quick focused strike with a small contact area on the side of your thumb. So your thumb is in physical contact with the string for a very short period of time. With double thumping, you're striking through the string, which is staying in contact with your skin longer as it wraps around. Plus, you're utilizing the upstroke. And the fact that your thumbnail is a harder material than the pad of your thumb, there's more inconsistency in tone. And because of the slightly less contact time with traditional slap, I seem to be able to get shorter and tighter ghost notes than double thumping. The second advantage that I personally think traditional slap has over double thumping is cleanliness. Just by virtue of the technique, double thumping means you're automatically doing more. And doing more just means you're introducing more variables and artifacts. But this is just my opinion. I would love to hear yours, so please leave a comment. I personally like to play traditional slap, but I also like to add a couple little elements of double thumping into what I do. I'm Rib13. Thanks for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I do have a Patreon account, and a special thanks to my patrons, Derek and Joe, and I'll see you next time.